No, thank you very much, and buonasera to everyone in Rome. Of course, we would have wanted to be there ourselves, but now we're doing digitally, and hopefully we will meet each other in the future. We will speak for around about 25 minutes, and then, of course, we would love to have some room for a quick conversation. But we're lighting up the Rome night, and I think that's a great initiative that you have started, because this is this conversation that needs to happen. So here we go. So, and if you weren't already awake or ready for the night, then you probably are by now. We very much enjoy the fact, so Vibe Lab is a purpose-driven consultancy. We do consultancy, but we also do a lot of research and advocacy work. And because really the life at night is an untapped research field. I was the nightlife mayor of Amsterdam, and as our host already mentioned, Lutz is the spokesman of the Berlin Club Commission. The night mayor in Amsterdam is really a bridge builder. It's really to create mutual understanding so that everyone in the city residents, nighttime advocacy groups, nighttime operators, but also city councils and the mayor have a direct link with each other, and there's mutual understanding. I was a direct advisor to the mayor of Amsterdam, and we really help the mayor's office, but also the city council and everybody in this field understand better what happens at night. We gather a lot of content and gather a lot of knowledge, and we build and share. We are very much an open source platform. So we invite you to go to nighttime.org. That's a platform where you can find a lot of research that have been done all around the world on the nighttime space. But we really like to educate and network, and we organize a lot of workshops and hackathons and conferences and keynotes. Some of this we're participating in now. But we also, and that's because we're so much rooted in advocacy work, we are advocating for the night as well, building awareness and creating advocacy tools. So we really believe that the urban night is under-researched. Later on in this today, that's why I'm sharing this slide. Because we think the night should be researched much more. We need to really understand what's going on. Later today, you will see a presentation from Andrea Nasellas, who is the co-author of a piece that we did together. The first scientific paper was released by Urban Studies on the rise of the role of the night mayor, and we tried to coin the term urban governance. The Global Nighttime Recovery Plan, here all the way on the right. You can also download this. It's the 7 white papers that you can find on nighttime.org, really trying to understand what are the effects and what are the effects of the night in general. So in the recent years, I was the night mayor of Amsterdam from 2012 to 2018. And Lutz, of course, doing the same in Berlin. But in all the cities that we worked and that we researched, we found out that every time when we're looking at cultural vibrancy, as we like to refer to it, because when people say nightlife, it has often like a bad connotation to it. You directly see drunken tourists or young kids hanging out on the street, and we forget about all the great cultural activity that is happening. The night is built of the creative community and an influential group that really shapes the identity of a city, and that really also drives the urban economy. But it's also about the creative space, and the creative space can be anything from an incubator to a nightclub or music venue or a dance studio. This creative space is very important. It's a three-dimensional space, and it's where people perform and rehearse, and which is really a meeting point for different communities. But also we have the policy framework, and the policy framework is what ties everything together. And it's really often when people or cities want to invest in the night or want to improve the urban night, they really think, oh, now we have to start opening up our pockets and have to invest a lot of money. But really often there are simple policy changes that can be made in a city to improve the quality of life for city residents, but also for, of course, the creative industry and with it, the urban economy. We believe that there's three dimensions connected to cultural vibrant city. That's the aesthetics, or the cultural dimension. It's the social dimension, and it's of course the economic impact it has. And the cities benefit also from having a vibrant night from social, cultural, and economic perspective. Social, of course, people socializing and meeting with each other. When it comes to from a cultural perspective, it's really about curated venues, but also light installations, performances, etc. And from an economic perspective, we all understand what the economic value of tourism and of tourism, but also life at night is for cities around the world. Often when we speak to cities about what is the role of the night mayor, what is nighttime governance in general, we realize that we can take a slice of basically every part that is happening during the day and transition it to the night, because in some way it has impact on what is happening. So that's why this is so the night and nighttime governance is so important also for city councillors to look into, because probably everyone has in their portfolio something that is also happening at night. And whether this is about health and prevention, whether this is about safety and well-being, but also about placemaking and city planning. Personally, we are very much involved in making sure that the night is more diverse, inclusive, and equitable, that everybody can take a fair share, and not only a small group is taking the benefits, but also, of course, looking at mobility and transportation. How do people move around in the city at night? How do we make sure that music venues, music festivals as well, because that's a big part of the nighttime economy, it also becomes more sustainable. So I think that everyone that works in city politics can see something here that's part of their portfolio and would be interested to share information on. So Rome is not dealing with this problem by itself. Many cities around the world are having challenges in rethinking the urban night. How do we use the city 24/7? And in the recent years, and the biggest growth happened in 2016 and 2018, we have seen nighttime night mayors, nighttime advocates, club commissions, in all variety of form have emerged over the recent years. We have now already more than 65 cities that have installed either a night mayor, a director of the Office of Nightlife, or a club commission in their city to really bridge the gap between the city residents, nighttime operators, and City Hall. I would now like to hand over to Lutz that can talk to you about some case studies and best practices that we have gathered over the years.
Yeah, thank you, Mirik. Hello from my side. One of the topics that popped up in the recent years of my role as a board member and spokesperson for the Club Commission was an increasing amount of so-called illegal raves in public parks and in abandoned buildings. And the usual reaction on this phenomenon would be to shut it down, to call the police, to make sure everybody gets a fine who is involved. And we thought maybe there needs to be a different approach, because it's a phenomenon that is increasing since social media popped up. And if you go on, Mirik, you can see here that that there were posts on Facebook, but also from the local media that says, Facebook parties were happening in the park. And we were already seeing that there's a big misunderstanding that this is not like a party of Mark Zuckerberg. That isn't happening because young people want to use public space also for their purpose. And why not should they be allowed to dance in public if they make sure that there's not noise and no littering? So, Mirik, when we move on. So we started a dialogue process, and we involved a lot of different parties in the city, and maybe also some parties you would not expect. For instance, this is at the Chamber of Commerce in Berlin. So the Chamber of Commerce, who is also part of the educational system in Germany, we invited them to be part of that project where we educate young people how to do their events and what basically makes them illegal if they do it. And then, but at the same time, we also wanted to involve the public, so representatives from the administration, to also understand maybe what they have to change in the system, in policies, in policy making, because also the times are changing and maybe they have to do adjustments. So this is an ongoing process, and we had more than 500 participants from the city side as well as from the nighttime community participating in these workshops and learning from each other and making the system better. And by doing this, we learned a very beautiful word. So this is German. Probably everybody recognizes it because it's a very long word. It's the Baumscheibenbepflanzungsrichtlinie. And why is this so beautiful? This word basically describes that there is a law or a guideline that makes sure that in some areas of the city, people started to plant little gardens outside of their homes on public ground. And this is something that actually is very welcoming. You like to have people taking care of public space and that they plant nice flowers, but at the same time, it's not legal. So there was an ongoing discussion in the city. What should be the response of the city? Should they just shut it down and nobody's allowed to plant flowers anymore? And the city decided to create this Baumscheibenbepflanzungsrichtlinie, which it basically is a guideline describing that, yes, it is illegal, but we can tolerate it. We basically use this gray zone, and we make sure that this is basically happening in a frame that is acceptable for the public. And so our strategy was to use a similar guideline for free open airs, for pop-up events that happen in the city, because we also think those are the beautiful, colorful dots that should happen in the city and make the city more livable if people want to do dancing in public space. And the ongoing process that we then led over many years led to conversations with the police, but also with city government and administration. And we actually succeeded that it became part of the current Senate to implement a policy that makes those pop-up spontaneous events legal. And I think that is an ongoing process. We are not there yet, but you can see that the dialogue is already very valuable, and we can make sure that that there's a better understanding for both sides.
Yeah, and if I can take over from here, Lutz, the reason why we think this is an interesting case study to look at, because we understand that in Rome, a lot of youngsters are using the public space to socialize, to come together. And of course, this creates noise and nuisance for neighbors. There's probably littering going around. And I think it's very important to research what is the reason why these youngsters are using the public space. Why are they not going to nightclubs? Why are they not going to music venues or other cultural spaces where you have the right facilities to accommodate these people, and also where somebody is responsible for their behavior in the end? So I think really developing a dialogue, but also developing something that people would like to go to at night instead of just lingering in the public space. One of the projects that we did in Amsterdam, which was related to the public space, was it's called the Rembrandtplein. Rembrandtplein is a very famous square in Amsterdam. It's a nightlife district, or cultural district. And as you can see on this photo, it was very crowded. The Dutch, the Amsterdammers, they love to park their bicycles, but not really like somewhere, but they're like in front of the door, sometimes in the door. So you get a lot of obstructions in public space, and there's people crowded, and it's very crowded everywhere. And this leads to also conflict that the city had to deal with, because this conflict leads to a decrease in quality of life for city residents, people littering on the street, etc. So we came up with an approach which was called Safe and Hospitable Rembrandtplein. To start a project like this, I have to explain that the Rembrandtplein district is 5 blocks wide and maybe five blocks wide, 5 blocks deep. But it's really about working together with the city residents, with the nighttime operators in the district, and with City Hall together in trying to understand what the issues are. And one of the big issues that when we did a night surgery, so we patrolled the streets on multiple nights together with the city residents, and we just made a list of all the things that went wrong and that could be improved. Excuse me. So we cleaned up the public space. That was a very important point, and moving the bicycles to the outside of the square. We looked at the tax, and we introduced taxi marshals to keep an eye on the taxi ranks so that we don't have a lot of conflicts at night, people trying to get home. We also looked at lighting. Lighting can be used as a tool to make it more safe, but it can also create a bit of let's say an aggressive or unpleasant atmosphere in a district if it's too bright and if it's too if it's too bright. In return, the nightlife operators got an extended opening hours, and really often when people say, wow, how you're dealing with the issues of the night by giving extended opening hours, well, we also spread out to people more over the night. And what I see happening in many cities around the world is when venues close, they all close at the same time. So the people spill out onto the streets all at the same time. And traditionally, that leads to a lot of conflict in Amsterdam between 4 and 5. Spreading people out more over the night leads to a more pleasant flow. But we also introduced square hosts. These hosts patrol the streets on Friday and Saturday night at the Rembrandtplein when it is most busy. And they function as an intermediate. They support the police. They have a check-in with the police every night to understand what the issues are that night, and also be the eyes and the ears of the police as well. So they don't have to be there with big police force and as well. But also a direct line of communication between neighbors and BOAs. So these are community officers. A direct line of communication that understand the neighborhood, that know where the problems are, and can also react in a really quick way. This whole project was a public-private funded project, and I even have a city resident group director really told us this project changed his life. So some of the results, so here you can see a host post. This is where the hosts meet together, where they give advice, where they help people through the night, where they offer maybe a bit of water if somebody is sick, but really make it a very pleasant space to be there. As you can see in the background, there are no bicycles anymore, so people can also not bump into each other. The whole area is nowadays, it's a pedestrian area, so there's no bicycles or cars or anything coming into the area anymore. And this is some of the results. The project has had a massive impact on the neighborhood. There was a decline of around about 20% of alcohol-related violence. That was really the core driver for the mayor of Amsterdam, Eberhard van der Laan. Unfortunately, he passed away, but he was one of the best mayors we had in a long time, and he was also a lawyer, so he was always very close in contact with the police. So 20% decline of alcohol-related violence and 28% of the decline of reports of nuisance of any sort. This public-private funded project was not cheap at all. It was very expensive, but also the nighttime operators, they also paid in 1/3 of the budget because they also got extended opening hours. I'm going to hand over now to Lutz again to speak a little bit about a toolbox they developed for a better communication between neighbors and nighttime operators.
Yeah, what we did in Berlin to tackle a lot of the problems that are around noise and littering, but also to encourage operators to work more sustainable, we basically developed a website where we collected all the best practices that have been tested and described it, so local districts, neighborhoods could implement those ideas that have been already tried and tested. Another very successful project, which is also related to investments by the city, is the so-called Noise Protection Fund. So so it's about soundproofing music venues, and the city of Berlin is spending around 500,000 euros per year in making sure that that clubs and music venues are soundproofed. And you can apply for this fund, and on the left side you can see this huge speaker on top of the DJ booth, and this is an outside area of a club in Kreuzberg, and it makes sure that the noise is centralized on the dance floor and not spreading around in the area, and which would lead to complaints with neighbors. So it's a kind of a noise canceling sound system, which is expensive, but now this venue can exist and can focus on booking artists and making sure that there is a stage for emerging artists and art, and not investing in a sound system that probably would increase and their costs and would lead maybe that they have to turn more mainstream. So I think it's a benefit for the neighbors as well, for the city as well, for the operator, and it is a success story. And similar to Mirik, there are no neighborhood groups anymore, because they basically dissolved after this project was implemented. A project that we are researching in different cities in the world. We just finished a study in Stockholm, but you can see that we also did a study in Berlin, New York, Tokyo, and this year also already we are in the planning of doing it in Montreal, in Canada, and in Sydney, Australia. The creative footprint is a tool to measure the amount of creative space. It's a data-driven study where we can map and measure creative space and the impact of the cultural activity. So what our goal is here is not to measure the economic impact, but the impact of community, the impact of creative space and culture. And this is an example. So in New York, we researched about 500 music venues, and we could see a lot of interesting insights where the most venues are located, but also where our more experimental spaces are located, or the more the mainstream is located. And we understood also that there is an interesting correlation between venues, young adults, and subway transit, which is interesting because it means if you want to attract well-educated talents, and if you want to retain them in your city, then a good public transportation and music venues is a good way of keeping them. And this study that we did now in several cities have a similar result in all the other cities that we researched. What does this help? We can now, by mapping these venues, we can actually monitor the changes of a rapid changing city. And especially in these times when COVID and war in Europe is impacting our inner cities, we want to be sure that we don't lose creative space, or if we lose a creative space, that it is able to open up somewhere else in the city. So there's a balance in the change. And the creative footprint in Berlin led to a very special project. It's called Clubkataster. It's a map. It's a live map basically of music venues, and we map it with the city developments of the city. So every building, new areas that is being developed is now mapped towards music venues, and we can see even in a trend study way, where are the upcoming conflicts? Where do we have to maybe look a bit closer, start a mediation process, or implementing a soundproofing, so we make sure that we are not always reacting and creating disaster. It's about designing the future and designing the night. Yeah, so talking a bit about the nighttime advocacy process, when cities ask us what are the best way to implement this kind of advocacy, I mean, Mirik likes to say that in Berlin the Club Commission exists already since 20 years. This is true, but we also saw that that recent cities made big steps by following certain steps that are relevant, and I think which is very important that we start by conferences like this, getting inspiration from other cities, learning from the tools and best practices that are already out there, because you don't have to reinvent the wheel on your own. It's also very important to go into an assessment phase, to really know who are the stakeholders, where are the spaces, to really have numbers, facts, and figures, and not just emotions, which your decisions are based on. Then going into an action planning and involving a lot of people from the scene by creating a manifesto, a value system, a strategy, certain milestones that you want to achieve, so everybody is on board. And then you can start to create awareness, to do a campaign, to do panels, to do a conversation with the city representatives, as well as people from the community, and start shaping your action plan. And then you have to create access to decision makers, because then I think it's very important to have a dialogue with certain stakeholders on the city side, but also on the community side. And then it's important to have a role as a night mayor, a nighttime advisor, a night council or club commission, an organization that can help you on a constant dialogue to create a network, partnerships, and also a funding structure, because as we saw before, not everything is for free. Some things have to be invested. And then finally, education, because we see that not a lot of people who work in this business really studied what they're doing. So it is important to constantly learn, to offer platforms where people can network, can learn from each other, but also have expertise accessible to those people on the city side as well as on the community side.
Yeah, so and rounding up this this presentation with some conclusions, which I would like to elaborate a little bit on. So we really believe that the nightlife community needs to unify their voice. It's very difficult for cities officials, for the city council, but also for the mayor, if the nighttime community is not organized. You could think about, of course, in a more general way, so venue owners, music festivals, etc., but also more in student organizations, all people that have influence on a certain group that you want to, of course, influence, or you will hope that their behavior will change. These night mayors, and I hope that Andrina will also talk about this in a little bit more. The night mayors all around the world are advocates. None of them have the power to change policy by themselves. It's always through the mayor or through city council that has the final vote. So these night mayors, whether they're inside or outside city government, they're all advocates, and they have to lobby and bring people together to change policies in the city. And we always say, if you can't vote for it, nothing will change. So please, I hope that there are some city councillors in the room. Please put down those bills, those initiatives, and let them go to city council. So hopefully we can change the nighttime governance for the better. We need to research the urban night and really serve people with facts instead of emotions. Many decisions in nightlife are based on emotions. It's too noisy, it's too loud, this can't happen anymore, and there's often a small group of people that influence the media or the city council in a really big way, and then we often lose the value that it actually brings to the city. So more research needs to be done, and we would always encourage to work on this. But to make sure that this research has impact, the bottom up and the top down needs to be in place. This needs to come from both sides. It's not only that the city is now top down changing the policies without consulting and finding the mutual ground and creating mutual understanding to really drive change. We always like to advise into organized pilot programs, small pilot programs, big or large. The Rembrandtplein project, which I spoke about before, was a 3-year-long pilot, and every year it was evaluated and adjusted a bit. So you change nightlife, or you change the night, street by street, block by block, area by area. So if there's like, if you have challenging areas or challenging squares in the city, try to organize pilot programs and to better understand what is the flow of the people, and make sure that that you get mutual understanding so that you can drive the conversation forward. I would like to invite you all to connect with Lutz and myself via the various of channels, of course, social media, LinkedIn, wherever you want to find us, but also have a look at nighttime.org and create a footprint where you can download our studies for free, or they're just easily accessible, and which hopefully will help to understand better what the urban night is about. So thank you for this moment, and we will switch back to the room. Thank you.